Okay. Well, welcome. Hi, everybody. I'm Laurel Hanson, MACC Program Manager, and I'm joined by my co-moderator, Clara Owen, live from Georgia. She's MACC Communications Director, and we are frequent co-hosts on the MACC Zoom-ins. And we want to thank you for joining us today. This is, as you can see, MACC zooms in on fundraising in a persistent pandemic, and we are ready to get started. We got a great panel with us here today. So this is a convening that continues this series of MACC Zooms where we bring members together during what has been difficult times, and we've been grateful that we've been able to connect. But we're listening to you as our MACC members and really making an attempt to convene around the things, the topics that matter to you. And we think this is a great topic to touch on at this time. So while each of our members has a distinct voice in the community and a unique mission, the MACC network is united by that belief that we have a greater impact when we partner and connect. And so on behalf of your network, MACC, thanks for being here. We start our Zooms with an acknowledgement. I think that's what we're going to do next. We begin today first by acknowledging and honoring the truth of our journey to where we are today. Every community owes its existence and vitality to generations who have come before. Some were brought here against their will, some were drawn to leave their distant homes in hope of a better life, and some have lived on this land for more generations than can be counted. Honesty and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connection across all barriers difference creates. So wherever you are located within the Twin Cities, we are on the stolen lands of the Dakota people. We pay respect to their elders, past and present. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, slavery, migration, and settlement that is a part of the journey to today. Thank you. So as you can see, we have many great MACC member organizations that have joined in this event today that have registered to attend. It's always so great to see our members. So I want to thank you for registering and participating. In the interest of time, we won't do that full introduction round. That would take up the whole Zoom. But do feel free to introduce yourself in chat, especially if this is your first MACC Zoom. We'd love to hear from you. Please feel free to say hi. So we thought, as we jumped into the topic today, we would ask you a little poll question. So we are level setting. Where is everyone at? So my question today was, how are you feeling about fundraising in 2022? Are you encouraged and eager to get at it? Enthusiasm's high? Are you uncertain, just kind of waiting to see how it goes? Do you have concerns, but you know you'll get through it? Or are you just like losing sleep, worried, past the chocolate? Take a second to share your thoughts on how you feel about fundraising, and then we'll get started. Looks like a pretty good response. It's quite a split. We've got a lot of people who have concerns, but they're confident they'll get through it, and a lot of people who are eager. So a mix of enthusiasm and uncertainty, and I'm not surprised by that. Thanks everybody for participating in the poll. And we'll go ahead and close that poll. Before we jump in with the panel, I do want to just take a quick little sponsor moment, and I want to introduce, she's on the phone with us today. I want to introduce Jen Urban. She's our special guest and generous MACC sponsor. We thought it would be a good opportunity for you to meet Jen, and I'll just tell you a little bit about her. As the founder of the firm Legal for Good, Jen devotes herself to representing charitable and nonprofit organizations throughout our area. And Legal for Good guides nonprofits towards responsible stewardship through effective daily operations, respect for fiduciary duties, and thoughtful organizational development. I checked out the Legal for Good website, and it was obvious to me how how much Jen is engaged with nonprofits and charitable organizations, and also with donors on a variety of manners. If you look at her website, you'll see she has many areas of expertise, including some fundraising regulations. So she could be someone whose number you might want to keep handy should you need an expert. So let me welcome Jen, and thank you, Jen and Legal for Good, for your support that helps make MACC Zoom-ins possible. Jen, are you on with us?
I sure am. Thanks so much, Laurel. And for everyone who's participating today, please excuse my inability to turn my camera on. I'm suffering from the tail end of COVID, so I'll spare you the visual image. Again, thanks so much for joining today. As Laurel was so kind as to introduce me, like she said, Legal for Good is a law firm that I founded about probably 12 years ago at this point. And the only folks that we work with are nonprofits and individuals who are looking at being philanthropic, starting nonprofits and that kind of stuff. I started my career from a compliance background in the Attorney General's office on the charities division. So I pride myself in being able to help you guys through anything that you need. I've pretty much seen every rodeo that nonprofit land has to offer. So happy to stick around and would love to hear the discussion. If you need anything, just want to check in, I always do a free consultation. So feel free to reach out whenever you've got questions.
That's awesome, Jen. Of course, we send our best to you, want you to take care. And if we were with you in person, we would pass you the chocolate, because it sounds like you need a little TLC. So thank you again, Jen, for your support and for being here. All right, well, so now it's my distinct honor to introduce our great panel. Some old friends and new friends within the MACC network. Happy to have them here with us today. And we're ready to dive into this discussion about fundraising. We know that there's a lot of adaptations that have gone on in this field through the pandemic, and so we know we're going to be chatting about that quite a bit. So help me welcome Jill Pearson-Wood, and we'll when we get into the panel, we can take down the slide so you can maybe see people a little bit better. But welcome Jill Pearson-Wood, the Vice President of Advancement at Emerge. Hi, Jill. I know you're up there. And hello to Melissa Cuff, the Director of Development at Avenues for Youth. Hi, Melissa. Welcome to Jen Winterfelt, the Director of Development and Community Engagement at Keystone. Hi, Jen. And joining us as well is Allison Hobson, the Director of Development at Tubman. Welcome, Allison. All right. So I'm glad that we have the opportunity to have this discussion, and we know how critical your work is to the sustainability of your organizations, and how you've needed to be adaptive and resilient during these challenging times. So I will mention to our attendees that your questions through this session, I would say questions, comments, input are welcome at any time. We're not doing a formal session where you must wait for the Q&A. This should be a conversation. So feel free to speak up, chat, unmute, raise your hand, however you wish to engage. Chat is great as well. We will save a little time at the end for final Q&A as well. So welcome to our panel. Happy to have the four of you here today. And I just kind of want to ask for an opening statement from each of you. And so I'll give you a call. We're just really curious, as this new year begins, how are you feeling in your role with your fundraising goals for 2022? This kind of starts with what our poll question touched on. So how are you feeling coming into this year? Let me throw it to Jill first.
Thank you, Laurel, and good afternoon, everybody. I would say that I'm feeling optimistic going into 2022. So for the last couple of years, we've had just a huge increase in volume of grants activity, which has been great. We've been able to maintain most of our foundation relationships, and we've increased some of our government contracts in support of our workforce development work. And we also benefited from COVID relief funding through the CARES Act under Trump, and the ARPA funds, America's Rescue Plan funds under Biden. It seems like there's a lot of support for the workforce development field to help people who've been displaced by this pandemic and getting back to work. So we've been very successful in that. It did see a dip in our earned income from social enterprises over the last couple of years, and that is rebounding, but it did put some extra challenge on our development team to try and make up some of those gaps over the last couple of years. One area that we kind of put on hold, we are just about to hire a development coordinator at the beginning of the pandemic to expand our small but mighty team to 3. And we decided, just with the uncertainty of the economy at that time and uncertainty around how do you engage individual donors, to just put that on hold. So we did fill that position at the last quarter of last year, and our new staff person came in and put together a really nice virtual fundraising event for us at the end of the year. So I'm really optimistic, having somebody focused on just building those individual donor relationships over the next year, that we'll be able to build on that work, because what we have seen over the last couple of years is there's been a decrease in general operating funds out there, and so we see individuals as a key way for us to build that kind of flexible support.
Thanks, Jill. You've raised a lot of interesting things, and we'll dive deeper into some of those as we go. Melissa, how about you? How are you starting this year with your fundraising feelings?
Well, yeah, and thank you for the invitation to participate in the panel, Laurel. Happy to be here. And overall, on the development side, much like Jill, I feel very encouraged, and I would even venture to say I feel energized. However, I think, we at Avenues, we partner with young people experiencing homelessness who are ages 16 to 24. And there's just lots and lots of challenges for the young people right now, and especially for my colleagues on the program staff. And so a lot of the times we're just kind of balancing needs and wants, and trying to be good partners and supporters of our program staff working in shelter and doing that direct service with young people. So for me, it's a mixed bag. I will say, so on the development side, much like Jill, we've also experienced some challenges and dips in funding on the government side, and individual giving continues to be, for us, we've seen this trend with our individual giving of, number one, growth, but then also increased gift size, but fewer donors. So that's an interesting thing, that especially at the year end, we were seeing gifts grow and donors give more and give more often, but then we're not seeing as many of the mid to the small dollar donors, I guess. But individual giving has been, growing and fortunately helping us to fill some of those gaps. And I think a theme for us over the past, since the pandemic started, has been really focusing on building relationships, staying in touch with donors, thanking again. And I would say now looking back on those warmer months, now that we're in January, what I learned is get out on patios with people when you can, take advantage of those moments and opportunities. I am so grateful today for all of those meetings that we did have over the summer when we could do that. And that's what I'm thinking and planning for now, moving forward into the warmer months. Because now we can't do that. It's have to take a little pause and do Zooms and things like this. So, overall, I really do feel encouraged.
Isn't that interesting that you'll be planning your annual calendar around the weather?
Absolutely.
Good to hear from you, Melissa. Thank you. Jen, how about you? How are you starting this year? Keystone.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I think to echo Melissa and Jill, I mean, it's hard not to come off of the year-end holiday season and feel optimistic about fundraising. I hope all of you are, feeling warmed in your hearts by all the generous gifts and the support and the kind notes you get from people and just words of encouragement. I think that what I've said over the last couple of weeks, it's, going to the mailbox in December is often like going to your own mailbox at home and getting all these lovely notes. And sometimes it shows up as checks. Sometimes it really is lovely notes from people telling them that, donors saying that Keystone is in their heart, and on their mind at year end. And so that is obviously always fuel for the new year. And then, but I have to be, I think donors are here and want to know how to help. And I think that's what we've been seeing over and over. I think during times of uncertainty, I think the thing that I've really learned and relied on is giving donors little bits of pieces of real concrete things they can do. Because I think none of us know what to do in this uncertain time. And so, but there's the side of me that's a little bit more of a realist. And so kind of worries. I'm like, how will we resonate this year? How will people tire of the pandemic kind of messaging that we've been putting out? There have been so many urgent needs, right? And I always think about the fire hose. Like donors, I think, have responded to that fire hose of need. We're a large basic needs provider. And so people have been incredibly generous. And I always a little worried, like, will that message still resonate as this pandemic kind of goes on? And how will we tailor that message? And how will we, share some of the other ongoing needs that are kind of persistent in our community? So I'm the mixed bag. I'm the optimist that I think donors, again, they care about us, right? We all live in community together. And even in some of the darkest, hardest times, I've been so moved by people's generosity and willingness to help. And I think if you center that in your decision making and hope that people will follow along, there's always reasons for hope. And then that little bit of worry, about how that will all look is what time will tell as we go through this year.
Yeah, it's such a unique experience to be in this field during a crisis, and then to be harnessing the challenges and opportunities then. And then because of the strange nature of this pandemic, it's like one doesn't really end and another era doesn't really begin. And you one step forward, two steps back. But yeah, thank you, Jen, for sharing. And last but not least, Allison, we'd love to hear from you. How are you coming into this year?
Hi there. Thank you for having me. And it's great to be here this afternoon. I'm feeling pretty energized and optimistic. Actually, our fiscal year at Tubman starts on October 1. And so all of the generous year-end giving has been tremendous from individuals and corporations and faith communities. So seeing just a lot of that support coming in. And I would say in agreement with seeing increased gift sizes from people. That's been a trend that's absolutely been, we've been seeing for a while now. In terms of general, planning for development activities throughout the year, one thing that is challenging is not being out in community in front of people, and that engagement piece, on all different levels, tabling, one-on-one meetings, small group presentations, that's where I really get my energy. And so that's been a little challenging, but I really feel that our supporters have shown so much grace. And, when people hear about the violence, at Tubman, we serve people that have experienced violence and trauma. Particularly our roots are in domestic violence. And when the pandemic first hit, the media actually really picked up on a lot of things. And I think a lot of you would have experienced that as well, but noting that someone in an abusive relationship, the dangerous place for them to be is at home. Oh, and then you have a stay-at-home order in place. Wow. And so, I feel like a lot of just what we've all been experiencing together, and realizing that some of us have it much better than others, has really spurred generosity and giving. One thing that I'm a little concerned, concerned is maybe not the right word, but thinking about our annual gala, which is coming up late spring. And so I'm sure that that's something a lot of you are wrestling with. The last 2 years, we've done 2 different formats, and this could be a third year of another new format. But I think we'll probably talk more about that later.
Yeah.
But overall, I would say I'm very quite optimistic about fundraising in 2022, and just hope that some of the predictions we're seeing for individual giving to potentially even increase this year would be wonderful if I had a crystal ball.
Yeah. Well, and I value the hope and optimism that we're hearing from you, and I know you're all dealing with some very practical challenges as well, and so we'll continue that. And you provided a great transition, because I'm really eager to talk about fundraising events. One of the tactics that your organizations use, and one of the apple carts that has been the most, maybe upset by this, are these in-person events that became virtual and or hybrid. So I'm guessing you're all in some version of planning mode around that, maybe. So yeah, let's get into that with the panel in terms of how are you figuring this out for 2022, since I think we thought we'd all be like hybrid or going back to in-person at some point this year, and now maybe we're seeing concerns about that. So how are you approaching your event experiences with your communities and stakeholders this year? And who's like in the thick of it right now? Jump in and give us a glimpse of what that's like for you.
I can jump in. We just hosted a virtual event in November, and we partnered with Trivia Mafia. This is the second year in a row that we've done this. And the event with Trivia Mafia, I don't know if any of you've done online events with them, but they're so engaging and charismatic, the hosts. And we heard from our board's fundraising committee that there's a lot of Zoom fatigue. So if we're going to do some kind of a fundraising event, there needs to be an entertainment portion of it. And so we worked with Trivia Mafia, and the fun thing about that, even though this is on Zoom, is that people created teams. And so not only were they showing up to a fundraising event, but they were bringing their spouse or their family or maybe their neighbors. And because it's Zoom, you could dial in people from across the country. So we had people attending our fundraising event from, I think it was probably 13 or 14 different states, an audience that we never could have reached in person. And we hired a professional videographer to do a really nice video for us because they're less expenses with a virtual event. And so the program piece of our event was really compelling and moving. And we brought in, I think it was about $85,000, $90,000 from this event, which is, a little less than what we would do in a in-person event, but we were thrilled with the number of sponsorships we were able to get. And we also had about 40 new donors as well. So for us, what we've heard from our board is that they want to keep the virtual event as one of our strategies going forward, no matter what happens with the pandemic. Like, this is just another fun way for people to engage with us. And then our hope is that we can have some in-person gatherings in the warmer months. And so that's our plan. So we're planning, but we're also just kind of waiting to see, what things are going to be like as summer approaches.
When you say warmer months, are you actually considering an outdoor event, or just because potentially the wave of infections will be better in the summer?
Both. I would say both. We did have a deposit at Ladonia tap room before COVID, and I know that they have some outdoor kind of spaces that people can sit at, or they've got some outdoor things, but it's really just COVID that we're waiting to see what kind of position we're going to be, how open we'll be as we approach summer.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. It sounds like some really unique, creative things. And I like the fact that you're measuring new donor acquisition as a benchmark for success. I think that's good to look for other metrics other than just the total amount raised. So that's cool. How about our other panelists? Anyone else wrestling with this right now? Allison, you've unmuted, I see. What do you got going on?
Yeah, so our event for 2022 is scheduled for April 30th. At this point in time, we do have a ballroom reserved. It's actually been reserved for a couple of years now. But we are, like I said, at this point in time, going forward with the in-person event, planning to have a virtual component, which I think is the trend that, we'll all be sticking with for a while. But I was thinking about mentioning one option that the format of our event last year was knowing that we were still going to have a virtual program. We did that. That was done on a Saturday evening, but we gave guests the option for a socially distant tour of one of our buildings in the afternoon. And we had a large food truck. It's called The Kitchen. It's a semi truck. They make gourmet food. So we had these amazing appetizer boxes that people going through the tours could pick up after the tour, or if people weren't comfortable or interested in that in-person component, they could simply stop by in the afternoon and pick up those appetizer boxes for maybe their group that would be participating in the virtual program that evening. So it was a true hybrid event. And I can say we had about 45 to 50 people that did come through the tours. They were set up so that we had a representative from each of our different programs at different stops along the way. And it was a great success in deepening the connection with those supporters that came through. Their understanding of our mission was just, increased exponentially by getting to hear and talk directly with our staff that are providing the services. And people loved the food. And our event was May 1st last year. And we had a little lower attendance on the virtual part because it was the first Saturday that reached 80 degrees. So people were out. But I have to say that it really went well and offered a nice variety for people to fit in where they were comfortable with the event.
That's cool. We're hearing, all these different types of innovative approaches and ideas. And I love that our member networks are trying new things. Like, if we've learned nothing from COVID, it's just try things, right? We've had to, and we have. So that's really interesting. How about you, Melissa? Did you have an event on the horizon for your org?
We do. And I was thinking about, Laura, what you were saying about, and Jill, what you were saying about having to adapt and continue. I mean, it's a lot of work. And for many of us that have had these long-standing events year over year, I mean, you kind of get the model and refine it, and it's more efficient, takes less staff resources as you go each year by year. And so we're just trying to be really mindful of how taxing it can be on the staff and volunteers to have to continue to reinvent and redo. So in our planning, so last year we had a really successful event in March. We moved our event a little bit earlier to try and capture that time in the colder months when we could so we had a virtual event. It was in the Whova platform, and Whova, WHOVA. And we did a pre-produced video, which we played in the platform. What I liked about Whova is it gave the participants, it was interactive, so they could engage with each other in the platform. And then we had a host model hosts could have breakout sessions to debrief the event afterwards, and there was speed networking in it. It was very well attended. We had more than 300 people attend day of, and we know a lot of people watch the video after the fact. We left it up on our website. So we are going to continue to use the same platform again this year. We have an event that we're planning now for April 26th and 27th, but we're shifting to a hybrid event. So hopefully we will do both. And so we'll do something very similar to what we did last year, which worked really great especially for our corporate groups, having an event during the workday in the morning. They can log in an hour, start work an hour late. had like a lot of people just said that was so easy and it worked a lot better for me actually than in person would have anyway. So, but then we're going to add, we know that you can't replace that person-to-person connection, right? The event is the one time when you can really like catch up and be with people. So we have space reserved, Jill, also at Ladonia for Tuesday as an after work social kind of thing on a Tuesday. And hope we can make that happen with kind of smaller group, limited registration. So we're going to try and go. I mean, it is like kind of too many events that we're planning, but hopeful with having those two kind of parallel tracks, the planning for it, that we can be flexible and make changes. If we have to cancel the in-person event, we can. We'll always have that virtual event there ready to go.
Yeah, I mean, that seems like just the need to be nimble right now, that you kind of almost have to have like that plan B worst case scenario, and setting up something as hybrid probably does give you that ability to toggle if needed at the very last minute even. Yeah. You mentioned the Whova platform. I think that's really interesting. And I'm just wondering if our panelists have, are there any other platforms that people have used or tried that you would either recommend or maybe just be like shaking your head like, nah, that didn't work out so great. Whova seems like a good fit for your organization, Melissa.
It did. We looked at a lot of others. For this year, we considered changing to a different platform. In the end, it takes a lot of kind of mental space to kind of learn how to use the platform. Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of times people will use like Bloomerang or platforms that, you know, if you have a silent auction component, there's so many good options for that out there, things that connect right into your donor database. For us, we don't have a silent auction and don't have something ready to go in our donor database. So that's why we chose Whova.
Yeah. Well, and I'm interested in the audience too, other fundraisers who have been in this work. And I see one, Kathleen shared one called One Cause that they've used for a campaign. And I think another interesting thing in the chat is our member Eastside, they're doing their in-person event, but they're pushing it out. So they're pushing it further into the year in 2022, just because, you know, tentatively that would maybe provide fewer hurdles as we get later into the year. So I think those are all, you know, unique and interesting ways to consider how to do. I mean, fingers crossed, right? Maybe later in the year things will be better.
Can I just chime in with something? So my suggestion is, I think about your audience, right? I remember Keystone has never hosted a virtual event. We listen to ourselves, we listen to our bandwidth, we listen to our board, we listen to our volunteers. And at the time we made the decision, we canceled something in 2020. We did a in-person something in 2021. It was in September. And I think we'll hope we can do something in person for this year. And mostly we talked internally about what's our interest in attending something. How do we tell our story? What is our bandwidth for getting our sponsors and our board to sell this to other people? And so we had to have some real conversations and honest conversations about our own interest in doing something virtually. And I think that's just that, you know, I struggled because I really wanted to do something hybrid, but we had to talk about bandwidth and capacity. And will we spend all this time and effort into putting something virtual that maybe we'll be disappointed in, that people don't attend, or that we wish could have been really, you know, something that a lot of people connect with, but we just have listened to ourselves and said, that's not us. That's not our audience of people who've attended. So I add that to yourselves, like be honest with yourselves about what you can pull off and to tell your story authentically. You know your donors, you know them best. Will they come? Will they feel safest online? Is that where they feel best? Do they really want to invite their neighbor and that's how your fundraising works? Then do that. But if there's they take time, so just spend it how you can that fits you and is telling your story authentically.
Yeah, wise words, and you'll never regret spending the time on the front end listening and asking. Just ask, right?
Yeah.
Ask some people that would come every year.
Right. One thing we did do this year, and I will say, so if you're thinking about an in-person event, what we did is we encouraged people to actually stay at their table. So we tried to design, as opposed to doing the mix and mingle at the bar and all that kind of stuff, we designed the evening with hopes that people would stay and engage at their table. So we played a bunch of games. We had interactive things that they would unlock throughout the evening, like a glass of champagne and things to do. There was, of course, lines at the bar. That was inevitable, but we did require proof of vaccination or negative test. So for us in the room, it felt the safest way we could do that. And then we designed the evening hoping that people would sit and engage with one another at their table and kind of try to replace that the social hour that maybe allows, again, something, as Melissa said, you cannot replace that in-person component. And so for us, that is really something that people, when we think back to our gala, people still talk about the silly games we played.
Yeah.
And we didn't spend a lot of money on it, and it was really like playing bingo and lots of interactive silly things to do. And it just, it gave people a reason to play and like be a little silly and get to know each other in a different way. So again, I think you can have a little bit of a playfulness maybe with your event that you've maybe not thought of before. So
yeah, how smart to really might get into sort of the micro look at, well, if we have all these people together, how are we going to not take this typical mix and mingle approach, because that doesn't feel like the right tone right now. So yeah, way to go. I mean, that seems like a really, really great approach. Yeah, well, keep us posted and maybe we'll convene again and we can look back and say like, well, we said we were going to do these things and what did we learn and how did they go? So I'm interested now. Some of you have brought up individual donors, and maybe this would apply as well to the philanthropic supporters that you have. But how have you noticed that donors have changed? We've heard a few things, but like what is one or two things that each of you have maybe noticed about the donor community in the last year or two?
So I'll say one thing that has been successful for us is Emerge as a workforce development agency, but when the pandemic hit, it was also the time that, George Floyd was killed. There are a lot of protests in the community that impacted grocery stores that serve our community. So we actually launched a pop-up food shelf. First, that was funded by donations from the community, and then we were able to receive some funding from Hennepin County, but that kind of immediate need of providing food to the community generated more individual donations than we've been able to do with any other type of appeal. So I think that's been really successful. And Judith, who's our new development coordinator, has said that she's hearing that donors want to keep their gifts local. So those are a couple of things that we're hearing. And I do wonder, going into this kind of third year of the pandemic, what we're going to kind of highlight in terms of how people can support us, because I do worry about that pandemic fatigue that was brought up earlier.
Yeah, I think that is the big question, right? How do we retain all these maybe new donors or people who are moved to donate? And
if I could pipe in for just a minute, I wanted to share that we've done a little bit of research through Legal for Good and have found that the amount of giving is directly related to the amount of disposable income. So it's not when there's changes to the tax code so much, it's when there's more disposable income in people's pockets. So we've also done a little research for pandemic wise, and it looks like giving in general, pre-pandemic, and I'm sure it's probably the same now, but that women give more based on the connection to the organization, where men give more based on the tax benefit. And post-pandemic, what we're seeing is that single women are giving a little bit less. And we're not exactly sure why that is. The only thing that I can think of, and I'm sure that you guys can come up with additional reasons, but with single women, whether the pandemic is hitting them harder than perhaps the rest of the demographics. It's difficult, obviously, to handle single mother families and that type of thing, and have enough disposable income to make those donations. So I just thought that I would pipe in and give
Yeah.
you some of those statistics that we found recently.
Yeah, thank you. That is interesting, and it would lead back to what you've learned about the disposable income being such a critical driver. So yeah, thanks, Jen. Appreciate hearing from you. How about others? What are you hearing from donors, or what are you seeing observed donor changes?
Yeah, I think, we had a few donors, right away. It was like, we're not going anywhere. We're not, as people with disposable income, maybe are a retiree used to going on vacation or splurging in some way. For so many of them, their lifestyle didn't change. We know, obviously, for all the work we do, we know that is a disparity that's not equally shared in our community. But from donors, they are really articulating, ask us, right? Tell us what you need. Tell us what's happening. For me, I'm so surprised. They know we're a frontline organization. So they're always, how are your volunteers? How are your staff? How are you really doing? And again, I think they see the work and they know, so many people are coming to us for food support. So it's really like, what do you need? How are you getting this done? Is everyone okay? Really seems to be what's in their heart. And then therefore thinking about how they can get involved. But I would echo what Jen really articulated is if there is disposable income, they want to know how to help in their community. I think that is what we see disparities. We see that this divide is, hurting more families of color and low income families more than others. And I think our neighbors really do care about that, and they want to do something and find. I always keep thinking about a donor sized problem they can solve. Right? They can't solve the housing crisis. They can't solve the pandemic. They can't solve some of these big disparities. But if you can give them something bite sized that they can understand and they can do something about, and if it's, with a $50 bill, that makes them feel good, and we can tell them, hey, we really did take your $50 bill and do something with that. And here's the impact that your gift made. So
An interesting
that's
approach.
my 2 cents.
Yeah, that's a very interesting approach. I wonder about on the philanthropy side, maybe, or even the funding coming in from other sources. I think in some instances, COVID made things a little. There was some more flexibility built into some contributions. And if that's been your experience, have you seen that revert back, or are you finding that sort of trusting flexibility, is that continuing? Any experiences from any of you with that? Melissa?
I can jump in to share. Yeah. We, to your point, Laurel, going into our fiscal year starts July 1st. And in putting together the development plan and thinking ahead, it was like, there's so much uncertainty. We saw a lot of generosity last year and so much increased giving, especially from our top donors. We call our top donors our dream makers. And our dream makers gave more. So we weren't sure if that would continue or not, but we've seen that continue, fortunately. That being said, yeah, so on the individual side, the difficult part is with the planning and knowing what to expect. So what we've just been trying to stay in touch with donors and have our few key people who are willing to talk with us openly. At the year end, we had a few donors approach us wanting to make changes to their will and estate plans and having conversations with us about that. Or donors, I can think of just a few examples of people who said, well, I wanted to do something at the year end. I feel blessed to have this one-time money that I have and I want to do something with. And or folks that are even new in their career and finding themselves with unexpected disposable income and approaching us. And so I think an important thing is trying to capture those things, keep those notes so that when you get to your next planning process, we're really digging more into debriefing as we go, because it's so much information, like Jen said, the fire hose. So we've started a practice with after each appeal as a team, like really debriefing, having good notes, and then just that's for your planning next year. You already have it ready to go when you come to that point. And that Yeah, because last year, we didn't do that as much, and it was much more difficult to plan for the next 12
Sure.
months.
Well, I mean, the whole year was a blur. So to try to take yourself back to what you were experiencing at some given point in time. Yeah, I think that's a good discipline to be really tactical about that. And it'll future you will thank past you for that practice. I'm wondering too, and maybe it's not an issue at your organizations, but it was just an article about the changes in workplace giving and how that's impacting nonprofits. An article in the media. So I'm wondering have you already weaned off of that, or is that still a critical part of your strategies? Are you seeing changes there? How are you dealing with anything that's happening in that realm of workplace giving? And if it's not an issue, then just let me know it's not an issue.
I could just step in to share that a lot of our workplace giving comes through corporations where we have a partnership program that involves 4 components: education, volunteerism, in-kind giving, and financial giving. And we'd had that before the pandemic started. But we find workplaces that support us, whether through Benevity or Truist, all the different platforms, United Way, donor designated giving. We find it's those corporations where we work with those employee resource networks, or we've done things that just beyond, it's more of a partnership relationship, where we're seeing the giving continue and continue consistently. And so our development manager manages those corporate and organizational relationships, and we're trying to bring in the employee giving as like a piece of the conversation more strongly. And you can't do everything and be everywhere, right? I mean, it's like hundreds of different employers they could potentially offer these, that offer these programs. But we're trying to think about fewer, more intentional relationships so we can think about consistency and plan for that.
Anyone else have anything to add about workplace giving and adjustments there?
I'll just add, workplace giving is kind of a small percentage of Emerge's individual donor gifts, but we do really push this with our board, because most of our board members work for companies that do have matching funds for donations and for volunteer hours. So if you haven't done that already, that's a good strategy to kind of start with your board.
The inner circle. Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's just been the last year or two has just been such a dramatic change to even the definition of workplace. So it seems like an area that's most likely been impacted. Another question that I was thinking about is digital engagement certainly has been, an evolving and expanding area. And I'm just wondering, have any of you adjusted your digital engagement with your donor base, or does it feel more significant, or are you still like grounded in the personal relationships, or what any thoughts in that area?
I have a couple of thoughts. At Tubman, we haven't necessarily increased our digital engagement. We've tried some different things, but we have a month-long peer-to-peer fundraising campaign in the fall. And that was a great way to engage people. We had our most successful campaign yet for that. In terms of, I tend to be writing more personal notes, note cards, phone calls. I think I'm still rooted in the traditional, person-to-person relationships. And even sending, one thing that we do is send a Valentine card to all of our supporters, and there's no appeal or ask in it. It's simply a thank you. So again, kind of the traditional mailed piece. But we've continued our monthly e-newsletters, certainly do e-blasts when we have things that are important, but we're also trying not to clog up people's inboxes. and just be sensitive about a balance with that. And certainly social media continues to play a strong role in letting people know what's happening at Tubman, or if we do have something coming up that people can engage in. So certainly using the email and the social media and online fundraising aspects, but I think I'm still pretty grounded in the higher touch points.
Mm-hmm. Great, thanks for sharing. So your jobs are hard, and you're coming today with optimism and generously sharing things that are working well, but there must be things you're struggling with. Are any of you willing to share, like, what are you really struggling with right now in your fundraising realm, and what are you concerned about in the future here for your industry and your field and your work in nonprofit fundraising? Anyone want to be vulnerable and transparent?
I will be. The one thing that I've been struggling more with during the pandemic, so I'm sitting in my office and I've been at my office almost every day of the pandemic, and yet Keystone has many locations, and I'm finding that loop back from programs. So to share those bite-sized little stories and information out to donors, I'm finding that harder. And I think it's because our program staff, just like everywhere else, is so stretched thin. So I'm finding it hard to, how do we feel connected to one another to get to know really what's happening, and so that we can share that out as a story, because there's good things happening every day and hard things happening every day that people want to know about. And so that feedback loop for me, for whatever reason, has been hard the last year more than ever. And so that's one of the things I'm trying to figure out, how do I do differently? Because me just showing up at a program location doesn't solve that either. It's like, how do we relearn how to be in relationship with one another, and for us all to understand that we're all on the same path in a different journey, to all being able to have the support that we need, to run our programs. And the ways that we do that is telling that story and figuring that out. So I don't know how to solve it, but I'm working on it. That's my big goal for this year.
I've heard that from other MACC members, not specifically to fundraising, but yeah, the siloing maybe of organizations as everyone is capacity stretched. Yeah, that's a tough one. Anyone agree or have a suggestion for Jen?
Yeah, that's tough. I would say that my team has done a really good job using the digital tools to stay connected, and that's not consistent throughout our agency. There definitely is kind of uneven communication and feedback loops across the agency, and that this prolonged, kind of working from home or having rotating staff in the office has disconnected us in those ways. But I'm optimistic about that, because we have a new marketing and communications manager who's got some really great ideas, and I think she's going to figure out some creative ways to connect with our program managers and hear about those stories. But it's certainly not as easy as when we were all in the office at the same time.
Yeah.
I have an idea I could share. We've been trying, Jen, we have had the same challenge at Avenues. And so we tried a new way, because it's in the pandemic. I mean, everybody's lives have been affected, and our young people are learning whole new ways of living and being. And so we've decided to make our young people experts of their own experience, to tell their stories. So we've created a new form, and we're paying them in gift cards to do interviews with us. But the approach is like, you are an expert of your own story. You know how to navigate through this best. We're in this new era. Can you just share that with us? Help us understand what that is for you. And that's been great. We've had a great response from the young people, and it's given staff and the development team, when it's been safe to do so, ways to engage one-on-one with young people. But we had to create a whole new form and protocol and process for gathering those stories, because we were kind of hitting a stumbling block. We didn't have any new content to share, and the program staff being so stretched and exhausted, this gave us a way to appropriately and respectfully engage one-on-one.
Thanks, Melissa. So we're closing in on, I can't believe how quickly these Zoom ins come, but we just have a few minutes left with you. You've been a wonderful panel. I just want to give each of you an opportunity to just share one more thing, something you'd like to bring up. It could be advice, but I know in your humble way, you're here with a network of friends and peers, and we're all kind of in it together. But let me call on each of you individually, just if there's any final thing that you'd like to share today about fundraising in this, I hate to say it, persistent pandemic. Allison, why don't I start with you? Anything you'd like to leave us with today?
Sure. I think one thing that just comes to mind, and this webinar is a perfect example, is surround yourself with other experts. Always be willing to say, I'm not sure what the best approach is for this, and to really rely on each other. I've definitely been surrounding myself with people that I can just run things by. We can figure out new approaches, new ideas. We're willing to be bold, take a risk. If something doesn't work, you always learn from it. I think that's just the best advice or approach that I'm thinking through as we continue on during this unsettling time and uncertainty.
So true, Allison. Thank you. And you mentioned surrounding ourselves with experts. I really feel like the audience today is like a focus group, a think tank. And I've been monitoring chat. There have been some really good shares, and I haven't had a chance to call them all out because our conversation has been so rich. But I hope everyone's reading over the chat, because there's been some really astute input from the audience as well. And thanks to those folks who have contributed. Jill, do you want to pop in next as we wrap up?
Yeah, I was going to actually say the same thing. One thing we did before we were able to hire development coordinators to hire an event consultant to help us plan our virtual event. And the great thing about that is that we were able to connect her with, the tasks that we didn't have the capacity for. So it's kind of a flexible approach depending on your budget in terms of bringing somebody from the outside on. But the best part about it is that this consultant had been doing events in the pandemic for a number of different nonprofits over the last couple of years. So she had a lot of ideas that she brought to us, and we did some brainstorming with our board fundraising committee and just kind of threw some things out there to see kind of what stuck. And then we ended up with this virtual trivia event, but she had a lot of other ideas about doing scavenger hunts. There's an app for that where you can, it's just great. So, engaging somebody who's doing this work with other nonprofits as well was really beneficial for us.
Yeah, that is good advice, and also allows you to be a little speedier when you need to be, that you don't have to ramp up as far. And I'll say that somebody would be interested in you sharing the name of the person that you recommend. So if you have that on the tip of your tongue, put it in chat if you would, Jill.
I will do that.
Thanks. Let's move on. Melissa, we haven't touched base with you as we wrap up. Last comments in the last moments?
Yeah, last comments. I would say just take care of each other. I know we're in a time of, even some of us have alluded to turnover, and all of us I know are experiencing that, people leaving, hiring for new positions. So I think we can, being really kind and forgiving and loving to our people we work with on our own teams and our peers in our own organization, and just really thinking about health and wellness. And so guarding against that burnout is really, really important right now, especially in this cold time. We're all really isolated. And that's something I think about every day, just like we invest in thank you cards and postage stamps and want to send those out to all of our donors. How can we do that for our own staff and really love and thank them too?
Nice. Thank you. And the last word I think goes to Jen, right?
Oh, you guys all echoed it. Kind of take care of each other and just be, kind and patient, and we will get through this. That's, and one day at a time. That's all we can do, right? Like, none of us can think about exactly what will be happening in April or when the pandemic will end, but we'll just do one day at a time, telling people the good things that we do, and we will get through this.
Thank you. It's nice to end with your inspiration. Greatly appreciate everyone's participation and all the attendees today and the engagement in chat. And thanks for sharing this discussion with the MACC Network. I had a great time. Thank you to our panelists, Allison, Jen, Jill, and Melissa, and our special guest sponsor, supporter, Jen Urban from Legal for Good. All of you on the call, watch for your e-goodie bag email at the end. Later on this week, you'll get that. There'll be a link to the recording of the session and some resources. It's been a great conversation. This brings us to the close. And I want to point out that we're hosting another Zoom in upcoming, already scheduled. I believe the invite went out, but you can learn more on MACC's website. January 27th, kind of a fun conversation about the rad and bad tech tools and tips of the pandemic. So join us for that. And this concludes our session today. So everyone be well and best wishes. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye now.